I'm really, really excited for today's episode. Before we jump in, just got to give a big shout out to OpenFortune. OpenFortune's the one that makes this episode possible. They're the leader in innovative marketing through fortune cookies. Reaching 99% of US zip codes and partnering with over 47,000 restaurants, OpenFortune places your message right in the hands of millions of consumers at the same local restaurants you already order your takeout from. Whether it's your favorite Chinese spot down the street or a go-to for delivery, OpenFortune helps brands connect with everyday customers in a unique and memorable way. So if you want to check them out, go to openfortune.com to learn more. Today, I am very excited. I am thrilled to have Devin on, the global brand director at Tinder. Devin's journey through the marketing landscape has been nothing short of impressive, with pivotal roles at OkCupid and Tinder, where she's been steering the ship of two of the most influential names in the dating industry, from crafting strategies that connect millions of users globally to creating bold campaigns that spark conversations. Devin is all about understanding what makes people tick, literally and figuratively. But for her time in the dating app world, she's navigated roles with brands like Walgreens, Boots Alliance, and Twin Oaks, owning her skills in shopper marketing and brand positioning. Whether it's been executing innovative campaigns or diving into the intricacies of customer engagement, Devin's career has been about making sure that every connection counts. So today we get to dive deep into her journey. And thank you, Devin, so much for coming on the show. Yeah, super, super stoked about this one. Like we were saying before, recorded about like 150 episodes plus over the last 4 years, and just I've never had somebody in the dating app category. So I'll ask you first. What was your first like? When did you first hear about Tinder or any dating app?
Well, Tinder, I think exploded, I guess, post college for me. I'm dating myself, but yeah, I feel like I was living in the city, early 20s and navigating, early jobhood and yeah, I got on Tinder probably early on, went on a few great dates. I ultimately met my husband in high school. We reconnected later on, but yeah, Tinder was huge when it first came out. So
And what were your first impressions of just like the dating app world back then? Because it's definitely, we'll talk about where it has led to now.
yeah, I feel like it was like new, exciting. I think it was game like. I think it was like, everyone was just excited for this new
Yeah.
way of meeting people and new possibilities. There was still a lot like happening where you were putting a lot of yourself online, right? Like then you were connecting your Instagram. I feel like Instagram started to become like a big thing at the same time too. And so like people were getting used to like crafting a digital profile in a
Yep.
sense, and dating being one of them.
Totally. So I want to, we're going to talk about Tinder and everything that you're doing there and all the cool stuff. But I want to go back and learn more about you as a person and dive into the meat of that story. So what did you want to be when you grew up? What was your first, in first grade when you're in class and sitting down? What are you writing on that piece of paper?
Yeah. I mean, I think I want like early on like that. I think I said I wanted to be a vet, like a veterinarian. Love dogs, things like that. So I think I said a vet. Then in high school, like if you were to ask me, it was like I had a film class and it was like a coveted film class in high school. It was awesome. Like everyone wanted to get into it. And that's when I was like, oh, like I think I want to go in like media and entertainment, like do something
Hmm.
in movies. Like that seemed really cool. A friend of mine, her mom worked in advertising and like asked me to be in a focus group about it was about ankle bracelets or something. And I went to this focus group. They gave us like a $20 Gap gift card to join. It was like something really early on. And I was like, this is really cool, like, talking about products that come out. And then I don't know if there was like a moment going into college, but like in college, I just knew I was going to major in communications, minored in business. So I don't know if there was like a moment that I was like, I'm
Sure.
gonna
Sure.
get into
And
marketing. Yeah.
yeah, and a lot of our listeners are between 21 to 30 and landing that first job, breaking into an industry, or they're making a career trajectory at a later age. How did you end up landing your first job within marketing, and what was the biggest thing you learned from that?
My friend was working at a big ad agency. She was at Gray. Her boss had sent a referral, like she knew um,
Hmm.
someone she was hiring for this company, Biology, which was a neuromarketing research firm. And so my friend sent me the job. I applied. I had like the most amazing first interview with Melissa Hobley, who's currently the CMO of Tinder. So I have followed her since that
Oh
first job.
wow.
Yeah, fun fact. But yeah, we like really clicked.
What about her? Like, did you find that you could learn a lot from, whether it was like her leadership style, right? Or what was that X factor for you?
Biology was a startup. It was super small. There was like maybe five or six, and they were all C-suite, and they were just looking for, someone entry level to come in and like kind of support the sales team. She was head of sales, and I knew I was going to like get a lot of her time, and she was going to coach me. And I mean, she was so charismatic. She is an amazing person. Like, obviously, I've worked for her for now, close to like
Yeah.
15 years. Um, and she was just inspiring. She made the work sound cool. She made me feel like I was going to be a part of something meaningful. And I wanted to be in. Yeah.
What did she teach you and just training in marketing? Because marketing, as a marketer myself, it's a lot of soft skills, right? So I'm never like I'm really good at this because there's just soft skills. It's not coding, etc. So what did that training look like for you?
Melissa is like truly she becomes best friends with like every single person she meets, like whether it's the person opening the door for you or like, a CEO at a company. And so I learned from her building relationships, which I actually think is now my superpower as well. And you have to have that as a marketer, especially working cross functionally. But yeah, she taught me managing up as well. I think she's an amazing she manages up very well. But it's the relationships piece. How to like, especially in sales, that was kind of the first gig there. And she just got inside someone's brain, and all of a sudden at the end they were eating out of the palm of her hand, and I was like,
There you
man.
go. Yeah, there's a lot of
Yeah.
psychology there, and
Yeah.
managing up is a good point. I think
Yeah.
it's something that's not talked enough about and is sometimes taboo. But I appreciate you bringing that up. You ended up having a ton of different marketing roles, right? But
Yeah.
before OkCupid, but was there a moment when you realized like, oh, like I'm pretty good at this thing, and whether it be a campaign that was run or just a moment that you remember?
There was a moment I remember, and it was at Boots. And so at Boots, so if you don't know, Boots is a trusted pharmacy in the UK, but in the US, we were bringing Boots owned beauty brands into Walgreens and changing the beauty experience at Walgreens. Just for that backstory. And number seven is like one of the biggest brands, famous for anti-aging skincare. And so actually, we spent a lot of time talking about middle-aged and older women and wrinkles and what that's like. And this idea never came to life, but I remember being in a brainstorm, like a creative brainstorm, and talking about how to reach these women. You're telling them, it's interesting as a brand, like you're telling them they're beautiful, but you want them to buy your skincare brand that's going to get rid of their wrinkles. And so I remember having a moment and being talking about like, well, let's talk about like what's inside a wrinkle. The inside your wrinkle is your kids who are driving you nuts, or like your job, or but it's all of the things that make up like your beautiful life, and all of that is great and should be celebrated. And I was like, early 20s, and I do remember like the reaction in the room being like, wow. And like it didn't go anywhere, it didn't do anything, but like I felt like, okay, like I'm creative. Like I have creative ideas. I see the big picture. Um and can see how like some ideas can translate
Yeah.
into
I
other
mean
things.
that's
Yeah,
such a I love that you can like pin it down to one moment because
totally.
those are those flywheels that like once you get that confidence you can keep going, and I'm
Yeah.
sure that it shows that has paid off in your career and continue to. Um, I want to jump to OkCupid and your time there. You know, anytime I see somebody who spends like 6 years at a company, I always ask like, what was special about that place? Because nobody stays 6 years if, at
Yeah.
least in our generation, right? If it's not great.
Yeah. OkCupid really is a very special place. The culture there is very unique. It was truly the most inclusive company I have ever worked at. Very eye-opening for me in my background, learning about, just people of all walks of life and like the passion that went into that product. And they held it so dearly and being so
What is that passion? Sorry to interrupt. What does that passion mean? Like, what's an example of that passion?
really from the product team as well, like especially of being like, because OkCupid had been around for a really long time, right? Like I got there when they were like, oh, we need a marketing team, because the category has exploded, right? Tinder came on the scene, the whole thing exploded, and OkCupid couldn't really exist based on word of mouth anymore. And but it was really like the history of the brand, like it kind of was a bit like it was a website, right? It was, built for people who like really wanted to talk long, like lengthy about themselves, right? Like it was like a little nerdy, but like really intelligent people. Like these were like they read the New York Times every day. Like these are very, very and probably had, a lot of schooling. And so people were really protective of who the product was for. And I think, the brand needed to innovate and needed to define itself. We needed to change. And so having conversations about like, do you add, certain features that are maybe more modern and
Yeah.
that the conversations around those decisions, you could just tell people held the brand and held the product like really close to their heart. And so every change was made meaningfully,
What,
and
how
still is.
did COVID impact you there?
COVID for the category, like everyone was very lonely. And so yeah, no one was maybe meeting up in person for a while, but there was a major surge because you were home and you had time and you wanted someone to sit on the couch and watch, Tiger King or make sourdough bread with. And so it was an interesting time. We had to be, a bit more clever about what you could do together. Virtual
Yeah.
dates picked up, people introduced video into the app so you could do that.
How have you seen the dating category evolve from a brand side since 2017?
I think we are at an interesting time because Gen Z, who is, who Tinder is going after and who most of the brands I would say or not most, but, the big ones are going after. And they have just a very different view about dating. They don't even say dating. They are growing a bit more.
What's the word that they use or words?
I mean, it's situationships. Like
Yeah, yeah,
it,
yeah. There's just other terms.
it's
Yeah,
you're in the talking phase. You're
you're a sneaky link. You're
yeah,
whatever it
yeah,
is.
yeah. And the priorities have changed too. Like, I'm a millennial and like when I think followed in that more traditional step of
Sure.
like, you're gonna get a job and meet someone and get married and buy a house, all those things. And Gen Z is kind of like ripping that up, and saying, you know what, like we're prioritizing ourself and self-care and all of that first. And so dating is coming a bit more second in line for that. And like I find that really interesting. And so we kind of have to meet them where they are. They want to meet more IRL, which is a whole thing, because they don't actually know how to do that.
Yeah.
Um, they might want that.
Yeah, it's
Um,
because of the movies.
it's because of the movies. They wanna
Everybody
meet
wants their
you.
life to be a movie, and that happens in a lot of marketing too, right?
Yeah, and especially, like, the way we live our lives on social, right? You're, like, this main character
Yeah.
energy and all this
How
stuff,
many
and
people have met on a dating app in a movie? Like pretty, like maybe some recent Netflix shows, but like not,
yeah,
95% of rom coms, if not more, meet and
yeah. You're
bump
not
into each other. You
yeah, at
know,
the coffee shop, and it spills, and he all this. Yeah, and you know what? Great. If you have that moment, great. Like I'm so supportive of that. But if
Yeah,
that's not for you, there's other ways to meet. And by the way, dating has always been hard. People
yeah,
act like this is a new concept. Way back when you met in churches or school or your family introduced you, and that had a lot of
yeah.
complications too. And then even when you were meeting, you were going to bar after bar after bar,
I
like,
I
you
always
know,
hate
that's hard.
I always hated, at least when I was single, when people were like, dating in New York sucks. And it's like, no, dating in New York's actually the best place that you could date. Dating sucks.
Yes. Yeah, it's hard.
So you ended up spending 6 years at OkCupid. What are you most proud of working on there? And what made you want to jump to Tinder eventually?
So at OkCupid, I'm most proud of we built the brand from scratch. Yes, the company had been around for a long time, but it was the first time they had a marketing team. And so I was part of those early conversations of who is OkCupid, who are they in this more modern dating world, and how are we going to show up and reintroduce ourselves. And the DTF campaign is something I'm most proud of because it was so bold and, dare I say, iconic, that we put DTF on the New York City subway, with OkCupid, and it raised people's eyebrows. It got attention, and said, "Oh man, like OkCupid's here again, right?" Like it's not my mom's dating app. It's not my, like, it's not the guy who lives in the basement. Like
Sure.
it's cool and it gets it. And it was award winning, and so I was very proud of that work. It was a small and nimble team, and again, like the passion that went into that, to reintroduce the brand was amazing.
Yeah,
So
that's such a ballsy move.
yeah.
No pun intended. That crushed.
You said before, like, I know you were at in 2020. Was it were you at Tinder or OkCupid?
Okay, Cupid.
Cupid, great. I was just making sure. So you mentioned like Tiger King and baking sourdough bread, but dating also has so many different layers to it. Where that's one layer, like comfy, cozy during COVID, finding your person. Then you have another layer where it's like, you know, take it seriously, like better your future, better yourself. And then you have this like fun, mysterious thing, like for so many different angles for one brand, one category. Like, how did you navigate that in different periods?
In some ways, I don't know if we changed it so drastically. At OkCupid, we always said we can be for Saturday night or Saturday night for the rest of your life. You're in control, right? I mean, you put into it, whatever you get out of it is what you put into it. And uh again, you're in control there. And so I don't think the brand positioning changed so much. It's just giving people the option. So
When it comes to, again, we're going to get into Tinder in a second, but just for our listeners who aren't really sure what brand marketing and what a brand director does, what is that role responsible for?
brand marketing is really storytelling, and building the relationship between the brand and the consumer. So my job is to, build brand strategies, and build campaign creative across all different channels and decide which channel is right, to reach a certain target audience, and tell a story about the brand, get your message across of what you want them to know and take away from your brand. At Tinder, the narrative for the Tinder brand was uh, dictated by others for a very long time, right? And it became, we're very humble. We understand we're seen as the hookup app, and so the past couple years has really been about reigniting the brand and redefining the brand, and driving growth for the app
To-
and the
Totally.
category.
Yeah, no, I wanted to jump in there, right? Because I think Tinder, at least when I was using it, right, was kind of known as the hookup app. And it's tough because I can imagine you know, there's a quote. I'm going to blank on the marketer who said it, but a brand isn't what you say it is, right? It's what they say it is. So if the consumers are saying that, right? How do you go about changing that? Because that's it's a tall task.
It is. You have to acknowledge where you're at. You're never going to change the perception of your brand until you acknowledge what people actually think of you. And so that's why they built the It Starts With a Swipe campaign. It's a beautiful platform that we've been iterating on for a few years now. And, you know, one of the first ones was one of the first spots said, you thought you were looking for one night stand and you ended up with two nightstands, right? It was so simple and so clever,
That's a
That's
good
great.
copy.
but it acknowledged what you thought of Tinder. You thought one thing, and it really can end up being anything you want. Tinder is for all possibilities, and
Yeah.
so it's a great platform for that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah,
I think that's so important and key, right? To be self aware as a brand, to know like this is what they think. We gotta acknowledge it at least, you know, and not just go the completely other way. So I think that campaign
yeah.
really encapsulated
Yeah, I mean, we
what's
talk
going on.
about Domino's all the time as like a great case study for that. Remember, like they acknowledge, like, yeah, our pizza sucks, right? Like our pizza absolutely sucks. We're going to completely rebuild it, and that was what reignited the brand. And so, if you don't admit it, people are going to call bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, it's also just comes down to trust, right? And so
Yeah,
if somebody's self aware and calling themselves out, you can forgive them and move on, right?
yeah, yeah.
This is just, you know, this maybe this has to do with brand. Curious on, you know, people in the dating app scene, right? Say, you know, Hinge is better in this state, Tinder is better in this state. Is that a myth, or is that does the data actually show that like that there's a stronger point of relationships that happen in a current state due to the culture of the app?
I don't think there's any truth to that.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking maybe like country by country or
Sure.
more on
But
that larger scale,
totally.
um, but if we're going to talk about like U.S. cities, you know, the ecosystems are probably pretty similar.
Yeah.
Um, and again, it's what you put into it. You know, we're there to facilitate, but you got to do the work.
Totally. No, I'm just curious, right? Because I could understand that, but I've heard people call it right a like almost as it is a different country and the state, but
Yeah.
very cool that you know just like you could lock that in.
I met my wife on the league.
Oh, okay. Very cool.
There's the cliche, it takes a village to build something really special. It's clear that at Tinder and OkCupid, you weren't the only person on the team, right? Um, how did you go about learning leadership and picking the right talent to sit underneath you?
Tinder was the first place where I was in more of a management role. And so I will definitely admit this is an area I'm still learning, but I like care deeply about because I think managing people is so important for even for I mean it, their success is my success. I feel like if like a leadership style that makes sense for me is I read I think it's called The Coaching Habit, and it's like taking that more coaching mentality of like, you know, building them up, helping them be, you know, a little bit more autonomous and make decisions for themselves. That's where I'd like to be. And you know, hopefully do that. But yeah, I what I look for, you got to be hungry. You got to be ready to hustle and get your hands dirty. Like I think I don't think there's a, you know, you got to be able to work outside your job description a little bit and be proactive. Like that is something I look for, and uh reward on the team is like, are you going the extra mile to, you know, help improve the process or the team or creative? Because I think also having a strong opinion and speaking, you know, about like your POV is really important, especially at a company like Tinder we value what some of the younger team members say because they're our target. So I am always looking to them. What do you think about this? And so, having like insightful opinions is really important. But going the extra mile, I feel like it could be my millennial self, but
I'm
that
with you.
that's yeah, you got to be hungry.
The reason I love that answer is because going back to what you said about like the wrinkles and what goes into those, that was kind of the advice that you took yourself and now want in others. And it's nice that you are not just preaching it. It sounds like you actually did that, and now that's something you respect in other people of raising their hand with a new creative idea.
And it doesn't have to be creative ideas. It can be it can be anything, but as long as you, I think, also like are passionate about the work, um that comes across. Energy is everything. And so raise your hand. You want to work on something that you're not currently being asked to. That's how you're going to grow. It's how you're going to learn. That's how you're going to get promoted.
You're battling with a lot of different apps, right? And they're constantly changing the algorithms, right? What they're pushing, different features. I'm curious, in the last couple of years, what's a feature that Tinder has installed that has just absolutely crushed, and you've doubled down on? And maybe one that actually just didn't, hit the way you thought it would.
I think Tinder is doing a lot of cool stuff with bringing friends into the experience, knowing that it's a little bit lower pressure, it's a little bit more realistic to how Gen Z wants to date, right? We want to be in more group environments. And so last year we launched Matchmaker, which was you can allow your friends to swipe for you, which this was an, I love this one. Yeah, because people were already organically doing this, but you had to just give someone your phone and they would swipe for you. And this was like you could send someone a link. Here's my matchmaker
That's awesome.
link, like, and you could pick, I think, like 3 to 5 friends to do it with, and they could help make recommendations for you. But I love that because it made it fun again, like when you think back to when they first Tinder came out, and it was like swiping was like the really, the
Yeah.
fun and new shiny toy. Like, I think this was fun to get your friends involved, and that was a fun one to work on.
We've had a lot of different CMOs, head of brands on. One of my favorite interviews was with the head of brand of Bombas. And they were talking about how the brand views brand dollars versus performance marketing dollars. Um, how do you think about top of funnel campaigns versus performance, and does Tinder allow for that?
Yes, we do performance. But actually the marketing team within Tinder is only focused on brand and top of funnel. So performance is actually run at like the match group level, by a central team. And so it's I love that because I don't that's it's not part of my job. Performance marketers are, that's a whole different way of thinking. Um I have a lot of respect for it. But it's very different than brand. And so
Sure.
it's yeah.
And brand is so important. And the more people I speak to, the more they talk about how top of funnel is so important. It's hard to measure ROI on it, right?
Yeah.
From the jump. But how do you think about when making purchase decisions on your campaigns, right? How do you judge the different options on a top of funnel campaign?
I mean, we do a lot of CTV, we do a lot of audio, and audio, I will say that, and that's podcasts and Spotify. And I think that's an interesting channel to talk about to answer your question because there's not a lot of ways to track um, the performance from it, right? I mean, there's some, and it's coming a long way there. But podcast host reads, and we're on one now. It's kind of hard to pinpoint the ROI from that, but you know there's data to say, hey, Gen Z is listening to so many, your audience is there, and it's an amazing platform to tell a story. And so it's a little bit of art and science when you're evaluating these things because yes, you can look at, okay, what are we going to be able to measure, and how can we, does this ladder up to my KPIs? But but does this fit with the context of like the narrative that we need to tell? And so it's a little bit of both. And I work really close with my media team on evaluating, all of our media channels, and it's some blurred lines, right? Like we do, some really cool media partnerships as well, that those are really for top of funnel. And are we going to be able to shift the social sentiment of how people are talking about the brand? So it all ladders back to like what are your KPIs, and what are you going to be able to move the
Yeah.
needle on? Yeah.
Over the time you've been at Tinder, what improvements have you seen from a brand side that you're extremely proud of?
So hookup perception was our number one focus, and we have moved that needle drastically down. It is very, very hard to shift brand perception. I think growth and driving, people to download, like, yes, like there's a lot there, and I'm proud of that too. But shifting brand perception is hard. That is a slow trickle, that you need to make over time, because we're dealing with some deep inherent thoughts that people have on you. And so I am super proud to just watch hookup perception trending downwards the past couple years. And it is very much related to the brand work that we're doing and being consistent with our brand narrative that Tinder is for all possibilities. And it's not the Tinder you once thought of. So I'm really proud of that.
What's been a campaign that you've done aside from podcasts, like maybe like a tentpole event, experiential campaign that you did that played a role in that?
Again, I think it's the consistent message of it starts with a swipe campaign, and it really beating people over the heads with like Tinder is a different place now. But I also am really proud of some of the trust and safety campaigns that we've done, because safety is a really big pillar at Tinder, but also with the category as a whole. And trust and safety is a really big
Yep.
factor in getting people to reconsider the brand. And so we did a cool campaign around the new feature called Share My Date earlier this year. And Share My Date was a really great one to talk about because, again, bringing friends into it, it's very similar, to Uber. You're going to share, you know I'm going to XYZ bar with this person at this time on a Friday night, etc. And getting friends involved. And so being able to talk about safety, but in a fun way, um, was very successful for us. And like we've started to build a formula for how to talk about that. And we saw one of the lowest dips in hookup perception that the month that campaign went live. So it's pretty rewarding.
We've talked about a lot of your career. I want to talk about your personal life a little bit. What are you most proud of there? And what's a goal that you're working on for yourself?
Well, I'm a mom, so that's the easiest answer in the world. My kids, I have a 5 and a 2-year-old, and I'm in the thick of like early motherhood and children, and like also navigating working mom life is hard, but like my kids are thriving and happy and smart, and so I'm proud of them and like the little family that I've built.
Before we get into the quick question round, my favorite part of the podcast, got to give another shout out to OpenFortune. As the philosopher Gary Vaynerchuk once said, I only believe in four forms of media: influencer marketing, biddable media, the Super Bowl, and OpenFortune. OpenFortune leverages the simple yet impact medium of fortune cookies, engaging customers across 99% of US zip codes through a network of 47,000 restaurants. It's a direct, tangible, and creative way to leave a lasting impression on your audience while they're thinking about their future. So if you want to check them out, go to openfortune.com today. All right, our quick question round with Devin to wrap this up. Person you'd most want to sit down to dinner with, dead or alive?
Taylor Swift.
There you
Sorry,
go.
Swifty.
Swifty.
I'm
Favorite
there.
city? Favorite city in the world?
New York.
Is it okay to sleep with socks on?
Yes.
You with me?
Oh,
You're my girl.
all right, David,
We
hundred
always bet
dollars.
on this, and I'm down a lot of money, but you hooked it. Best spot to eat in New York.
I'm not that cool. Shake Shack.
Favorite rom com.
Notting Hill.
In 40 years, what will people be nostalgic for?
Talking to people in real life.
One thing people don't understand about working at Tinder is
I don't think a lot of people know that we are mostly female C-suite team. That
very cool.
this is run by mostly women and not what you think. Yeah.
What's the worst advice you've been given?
I feel like I've been given pretty decent advice. I've had great mentors. Bad advice?
Come on this podcast.
Yes.
Sweet. What's the best advice you've ever been given?
Take the job, honestly. Like Tinder, I had just had my second baby. I was very comfortable at OkCupid. I probably would have been happy staying there. And this was a big leap for me, and I was nervous, and I'm really glad I did it. So,
Jumped
you
in
know,
the deep end.
everyone cheered me on. Yeah. So
Amazing.
I wouldn't be here with you.
There we go. And then in 10 years, where can we catch you, Devin?
I hope I will be back here interviewing as a true CMO
There we go.
for a challenger brand, similar to Tinder, um, or yeah, speaking at Brand Week or something, center stage. Yeah,
Amazing. Well,
yeah,
we'll get that
and
podcast.
partying in Cannes.
There you go. That'll happen sooner than 10 years.
with your
Yeah.
oldest starting high school.
Oh God.
Amazing. Well, Devin, thank you so much for joining us. And excited to interview in 10 years, but we'll keep up with the journey on LinkedIn. And thanks so much for joining.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.